and organizing blood drives that focuses on increasing black donors. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Deandra Smith as well. Come on down, yeah. Yeah, come on down. All right. So now you saw that there were a number of hands that did not go up. Well, first they heard about sickle cell. Let me get out of the way here. You heard they were familiar with sickle cell, the phrase, the ailment itself, but didn't know many details about it. I read somewhere that there's about 100,000 folks in the United States that have sickle cell, and I wonder, is that, I mean, when you look at the total population, is it considered rare?
Is this mic on? Yeah.
It's on. I'm going to give you a chance to go through your whole presentation, but just kind of think about, hopefully you'll go through that and give everyone an opportunity to understand a little bit more about what sickle cell is, and again, walk through, Ms. Smith, on how, those who have sickle cell, and how are you going through life? What are some of the things that are changing over the years that you're thankful for, and some of the things that still need to be addressed? Dr. Sherney, we'll start with you.
All righty. Is there like a mandate that you sit down? No. Okay, because I'm not a sit-down person. I'm like a stand-up person. Yeah. So, and there are my slides. Okay, so the one thing that he didn't mention is that I'm a proud graduate of the Detroit Public School System. Roosevelt, Durfee, Cass Tech, University of Michigan, Howard University, College of Medicine. Best single decision I made in my life is to turn down a scholarship at University of Michigan Medical School to go to Howard, and it was just fantastic. So HBCU, you got to do it if you can. Okay, so now the problem is that I have 100 slides about sickle cell, and they told me to bring 7, and I pushed them to make it 10. Okay, so I have 10 slides. I have a whole lot to say. I mean, if you want me to come back again, I will come back again because there's a lot to know. It's a fascinating and devastating illness, okay? So let's go to the next slide. And I never talk about sickle cell disease without talking about my father, Dr. Charles Whitten. He founded the National Association for Sickle Cell Disease, which is now the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. He started the Comprehensive Sickle Cell Clinic with wraparound services, a true medical home for families with children with sickle cell disease, and he started the community-based organization, the SCGAA Michigan chapter. That's why I say that I vacation on Boston Boulevard, and I live right here on the Lodge Freeway at the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America Michigan chapter. Next. So I was just talking to Ms. Tubbs, and she said, why is it that it happens in black people? And I said, I'm not going to tell you that right now because I have a slide about that, okay? So, and the other thing I'm going to say is how pleased I was to see how many people raised their hands when they felt they knew something, they at least heard of it, and other people who felt they knew details about it. One of the things that I know about sickle cell disease is that people don't know much about it, and frequently what they do know is wrong. So there are a lot of myths about sickle cell. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But one of the myths is that it only affects black people, and it is a black disease. It really is. And for that reason, it causes us a lot of problems. But it's not just a black disease. And in fact, you see sickle cell disease wherever you see malaria. Okay, because if you have sickle cell trait like me, then you're less likely to die from malaria. So places, particularly in West Africa, where malaria is endemic, then people who have sickle cell trait live, and they have children. And as Tate helped me with my presentation by telling you if you get one sickle gene, you have sickle cell trait. But if you get a sickle gene from both parents, then you have sickle cell disease. So if you have sickle cell disease, you're more likely, you're less likely to get malaria, but if you get it, you're more likely to die from it. So it's not really helpful. What you're supposed to do is have one sickle gene. How many people in the room know their sickle cell trait status, whether they have sickle cell trait or not? Okay, so that's really important, especially for my young man right here. As you grow up and think about having children, then you need to know your partner's trait status, because we don't want you to have a baby with sickle cell disease by accident, only by choice. Okay, so what happens is that if you superimpose a map of sickle cell disease over a map of malaria, it seems like they should just overlap perfectly because malaria is the whole problem, right? But when you see sickle cell disease in a place where you don't see malaria, it is usually because of migration. And the migration in this case was the transatlantic slave trade. So when they brought us over from West Africa to build this country for free and then tried to pretend like they were helping us out and teaching us job skills and all that, we brought our sickle cell genes with us. Okay, so there you have it. Next. So here is the problem right here, and if you go to a sickle cell conference, you're gonna see that slide because it's a photograph, a picture's worth 1,000 words, okay? And a 6-year-old could tell you, I would rather have this cell coursing through my body than that cell, right? Anybody can really see that, okay? And one of the problems is, push again, that sickle cell disease is named after something that people really don't know what it is. You know, if I'm giving a talk and I'll ask a young man in the audience, what is that? He'll say like a ice pick or a hook or whatever. Then there's a grandmother in the room say, oh no, that's a sickle. So I always show a sickle and what it's used for. It's a tool used to cut weeds. And the kids tell me, why didn't they call it banana cell disease, you know, or why didn't they call it crescent cell disease, so that we would intuitively have some idea what the heck we're talking about. But anyway, it got named sickle cell disease, and that's a sickle. Next. So here's the problem, and you can just keep pushing and pushing, because I usually like to do my own slides, but okay. All right, that's good. Stop right there. Okay. So see, I showed you that cell, right? And that cell is a problem. And there are two really big problems with that cell. The first one is that it's sticky, okay? So sickle red blood cells, they stick to each other, they stick to the wall of the blood vessel, and they stick to normal cells, and from time to time, they can cause a blockage, okay? Now this blockage, what red blood cells do, Biology 101, is carry oxygen to all the different parts of the body. So if a part of your body isn't getting oxygen, then click once, that causes pain, right? But a bigger issue than that is if your vital organs are not getting oxygen, that causes next, organ damage. So pain and organ damage. You know, pain is the thing that people tend to know about sickle cell disease. If I ask anybody, because literally everybody I talk to about sickle cell disease, you know, they say, who is this crazy woman talking about sickle cell disease? And asking me when I'm at Best Buy and I meet a young man who's working the cash register, do you know your trait status? And he's looking at me like, come on, lady, get out of my business. But anyway, that's what I do. And sometimes it leads to really good conversations. Most of the time it does. But anyway, so if you ask people about sickle cell disease and they don't know much, one of the things they'll say is, isn't that painful? Yes, it is painful. And pain is the most common complication that you see in sickle cell disease. And once again, it comes from the blocked blood vessels, so that part of the body isn't getting oxygen. But what people die from is organ damage, right? And so organ damage is silent. You don't feel it, you know, so it's really important to try to protect the organs of people living with sickle cell disease. Next. So the second problem with that cell I showed you is that it's fragile. So all of your blood cells come from your bone marrow. They go into the circulation and eventually they wear out. So everybody in this room is making and breaking down red blood cells, just as we even sit here, right? But with people with sickle cell disease, they have to make red blood cells faster because they're breaking down their red blood cells faster. Next. So there's the red blood cell being broken down, and that's what causes anemia. Anemia is, the definition of anemia is low hemoglobin, not low iron. If you want to find out if somebody's anemic, you measure their hemoglobin. You don't measure their iron. If you don't get enough iron, you can have iron deficiency anemia. But this is sickle cell anemia, and the cause of the anemia is the rapid breakdown of the red blood cells. Because if you don't have sickle cell disease, your red blood cells stay in the circulation for about 5 months. But if you have sickle cell disease, they only stay for 2 weeks. So your body is ramped up trying to, let's replace all these red blood cells that are breaking down rapidly. Next. And then the anemia is what causes the fatigue. And as a pediatrician, my main focus was always pain, you know, because I see these kids in pain, and one of the things that always stands out in my mind is a father standing with his daughter who's having this terrible pain and wishing he could take that pain on himself so his daughter wouldn't be feeling that pain. So pain was really high. And the other thing is I worked in an outpatient clinic, right? And so there are kids running around all the time, you know, doing really well, and I didn't think about the fatigue. But after 30 years, following and staying in touch with a lot of my patients, and I'll tell you that individuals with sickle cell disease frequently refer to themselves as warriors, and I feel that's appropriately so, right? And so when I stayed in touch with them, it was like the fatigue almost became a bigger problem than the pain. You know, sleeping for 12 hours and thinking you need another 12 hours worth of sleep. And you know, that fatigue can lead to depression and isolation and all kinds of issues. And I really feel that the incidence of mental health issues is not something that's it's underestimated and not well addressed, and that's something that we're trying to address better now. Next slide. Now, I'm just going to show you that, you know, every single part of your body needs oxygen. So sickle cell disease is going to affect every part of your body. And when you invite me back to do the second part of this talk, and then the third and the fourth part, then I will go over each one of these complications. But the one thing that I will mention is stroke, because as you know, one of the ways you can have a stroke is from blocked blood vessels. And that's one of the scariest things. When I do my initial education session for families who have just found out they have a baby with sickle cell disease, then that's the thing that's the scariest for the mothers to hear, or for the parents and the families to hear. Every child born in the United States and Puerto Rico is tested for sickle cell disease at birth. And we, the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America Michigan chapter, is the coordinating center for newborn screening. So when a child is diagnosed to have sickle cell disease at birth, we're the ones that reach out to the family and provide them education, get them on life-saving medicine, penicillin, to decrease their chance of dying from a serious infection, and then follow them to make sure, because the mission, the primary mission of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America Michigan chapter is to maximize the quality of life of individuals living with sickle cell disease. And then our secondary mission is to make sure that people who are at risk for having a child with sickle cell disease know about that risk. So I'm not calling you to tell you your baby has sickle cell disease. What happens a lot for me is the mother will say, he can't have sickle cell disease because I have trait and the father doesn't. And I'll say, well, how do you know the father doesn't have it? She said, I asked him. You know, I asked his mother. And, you know, he doesn't say back to them, what is that? I don't know what that is. I'm healthy. I can't have that, you know? And so that puts the family into turmoil and all kinds of problems with guilt. And I gave my baby this thing. I didn't even know I had it, you know? But the first question I always ask families is your baby supposed to be here? And does your baby have a purpose? And they all say yes. So I'm like, let's lose the guilt and let's move forward and try to make your child live the best life that they can live. Next. So now you're going to have to click, 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 click until it all comes up, because nobody uses Webster's Dictionary anymore, and they're hardly using Google. Now they're using AI. I might put AI in there instead. But if you Google healthcare disparity, in my opinion, what should come up is a picture of a black man with sickle cell disease next to a white woman with cystic fibrosis. And I have slides about why that's true. Most of it has to do with federal funding. The fact that cystic fibrosis has 4 medications, and we, at that time, in 2018, when we only had one, for 20 years, we only had one disease-modifying therapy. It's called hydroxyurea, and it's a repurposed cancer drug. So people would say, I don't have cancer. I'm not going to take that. Maybe it'll give me cancer. So we have this one medication that's a really good medication, but we can't get people to take it. So that's one of the challenges that we face. Next. So Tate wanted me to give some statistics, and he already started off with 100,000 people in the United States. That's an estimate. We think it's probably more than that. And what qualifies you as a rare disease is to have less than 200,000 patients with it. So we have 100,000, so yes, we're considered a rare disease. But what you need to understand is that sickle cell disease is not a rare disease. In the United States, it's a rare disease. The vast majority of people living with sickle cell disease live outside of the United States, and 95% of them, and a lot of them on the continent of Africa, right, because of the whole malaria issue, right? And a lot of them live in places that are under-resourced. And so the lifespan might be, instead of around 55, the way it is in the United States for the most common type of sickle cell disease, it may be less than 5, you know, because they don't have the things that they need, you know, to. So how am I doing on time, James? Okay, all right. Okay, so this is my last slide, so, but it has a bunch of stuff on it. I said, okay, I consolidated a bunch of slides so I could talk more. But anyway, in terms of treatment options, as I meant, well, for a long time, all we had was pain medication and blood transfusions. That's all we had, you know? And so when a mother came up to me one time and told me, Dr. Sherney, you turned my son into a drug addict, you know? And I'm like, oh, God, you know? And, you know, I mention it that way because I told you a lot of people don't know much about sickle cell disease, and what they do know is wrong. And one of the things that's wrong is that the vast majority of people living with sickle cell disease are drug addicts and drug seeking. And they're called sicklers. And when they come to the emergency room, they're like, oh, you just came here to get narcotics, you know? And while there are drug addicts in every community, you know, so there are a few people with sickle cell disease who are drug addicts, but the vast majority are not. And one of the things is that there's this thing called drug tolerance, which is different from drug addiction, right? So if any of us were to take the same narcotic over and over again, we would need more and more of that narcotic to ease our pain, right? That's drug tolerance. And almost every adult with sickle cell disease has drug tolerance because they have taken these medications their whole lives. And I don't often defend emergency room docs when it comes to sickle cell disease. But a lot of them who don't know much about it, they're residents and they're rotating through and the staff keeps changing. When a warrior comes in and asks for this high dose of narcotics, I think sometimes the emergency room doc thinks, I'm going to kill you if I give you that, you know? So that's why we have something called individualized pain plans, so that people can know, no, this is the dose that is required for me because I have this level of tolerance. So at first, all we had was blood transfusions and narcotics. In 1983, we got hydroxyurea, which is the repurposed cancer drug, which is a really good medication. It decreases pain episodes by 50%. It decreases the chance of getting a serious pneumonia. It decreases the need for blood transfusions. And after that huge study, it proved that people who take hydroxyurea live longer, okay? So then in November of 2017, we got Endari, and Endari is L-glutamine, so that's an amino acid. So people are like, oh, hey, something natural, you know, I can take this. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go to the health food store and I'm gonna get some L-glutamine. And some people had actually been taking it even before it got FDA approved. But we always encourage people to take commercial grade L-glutamine, which is what you would get from the pharmacy. But it decreases pain episodes by 25%, and it's kind of, it's gritty, and we have a hard time, once again, getting people to take L-glutamine. And then we had something called Oxbryta that got taken off the market, and it was a really promising drug. And my personal opinion is that Pfizer wasn't making enough money off the drug, so they took it off the market. They will tell you something different from that. And then we have something called Adecvio, which is IV. So we're making some progress. You know, we have a number of pipeline drugs. When I talk to parents who have just had a child with sickle cell disease, I tell them how it is so different now to talk to you about this illness than it was 30 years ago, you know, so that's important. And there's a tremendous amount of research, and a lot of that has to do with the whole idea that this is a rare disease. And the Rare Disease Act said that if you do clinical trials in the sickle cell in the rare disease space, you can have tax cuts and you can have early approval of medications, accelerated approval. And one of the things that I say is, if you want to know why something happened, if you guess money, it's for the most part, it was because of money. And these pharmaceutical companies try to come out and tell us how much they care about our patients and this and that. What they want is for our patients to take the medications. That's what I want too, if they're good medications. And I can't really be too upset about what their motivation is, as long as they have some motivation, you know. And so there's a lot of research going on, and I really feel, I'm going to end with this, I really feel that except for the weather, if you have sickle cell disease, maybe you should move to Michigan, because we have 75% of people with sickle cell disease in Michigan live in the Detroit metropolitan area and Ann Arbor. So they're all kind of clustered together. My colleague in Illinois, patients over here, patients a few over here, a few down here, a few, you know, but when you have everybody in a tight group like that, it's very helpful. We have the Comprehensive Sickle Cell Clinic with wraparound services at Children's Hospital, full-time psychologist, full-time social worker, dietitian, a patient navigator, everything that you need. So now I'm in the process of increasing the resources at the adult clinic at Henry Ford and Henry Ford Health System to establish the Charles F. Whitten Center of Excellence for Sickle Cell Disease. It'll be named for my father, and I'm very proud of that because when people left the clinic, the pediatric clinic, there was nowhere for them to go because the clinic in the Detroit Medical Center was severely under-resourced. And so that's what we're working on, and this is my life. And I was born on June 19th, which is World Sickle Cell Day, which is also Juneteenth, so my birthday for now until they start messing with it up there in Washington is a national holiday, and I expect gifts from all of you on June 19th. Thank you.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Dr. Sherney. And one of those gifts can actually be you going out and donating blood.
There you go.
The reality is there is a need for blood donation all across this country, but when we start looking at sickle cell and the fact that Dr. Sherney talked about the blood transfusions, that is not a simple task to overcome. It is very complicated, and it gets more complicated when folks don't go out and donate. And here's the reality. Black folks don't donate very much at all. And we got to make it very plain and very clear. We always talk about how we need to change the government for our people. We got to make sure we get the right elected people in government for our people and do all this. Well, what are we doing? What can we do by ourselves? Individually. Each and every one of us have life-saving properties pumping through our veins. I made a pledge, Ms. Smith, I made a pledge when you were here. I said I'm going to start donating blood. And it was 20 years before since I had donated blood. 20 years. I had a bad experience. I got to be honest with you. How many of you had a bad experience trying to donate blood? Had a bad experience. I had a phlebotomist. She was digging in my arm and digging. I know, ooh, imagine how I felt. Digging in my arm and didn't get any blood, but I had a bruise to show for it. That's all I had to show for it. And I said, I will never do this again. And then I started reading all of these articles about the low blood supply that we have and the fact that we as black folks need this blood, but we're not donating blood. I even talked to some people that I know that were recipients of blood and blood transfusions. I said, well, okay, now's your time to pay it forward. Nah, man, I don't do that kind of stuff. Even though he was the recipient. And if he had not gotten blood himself, he wouldn't be here to say, nah, man, I don't do that kind of stuff. And so I gave blood last year for the first time, and my team, give it up for the team as well, members of the team. We were over at the North Rosedale Park Community House when they had a blood drive over there, so I'm thankful we had it right here in District 1. We gave blood on that day last year in the summer, and then this year, like I said, I'm going to give blood at least three times, make up for those 20 years. And my first time was on MLK Day, January 20th this year. We had a blood drive over at Christ the King. It was full, packed, 70 plus people. Then I most recently, so I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and our Midwestern Regional Conference is taking place right now. Once I leave here, I'm going to go there and put on my black and gold. But right now I got my D1 blue on. But yesterday, I gave blood for the second time this year. And 55 men, black men, joined me as well. 55. Now there were 70 plus, 72 I think it was, that attempted to give blood, but 73, but for various reasons they couldn't do so. And Ms. Smith, I'll give you an opportunity to talk about that. But 55 men. Do you know how much is that in terms of gallons? I'll let anybody answer. Nah, I know it's a lot. All right, how much? Give me a number. 55 men, gallons. Okay, here we go. So they take a pint. When you donate blood, I'm not giving all your presentation.
No.
This is the real expert here. When you donate blood, it's 1 pint. That's it, 1 pint. All right, so we're going to ask our math folks in the room. 1 pint, 55 men. How much is that? All right, I'll give you the punchline. 8+ gallons of blood was donated yesterday. That's a round of applause. 8+ gallons. And those, and from what I understand, each pint has the opportunity to save at least 3 lives.
Mm-hmm.
So when I donated, and I'm taking some time here because I think we got to pause on this stuff. We got to have a conversation about it. When I donated, they actually gave me where my blood went. And the first time last year, my blood went to Children's Hospital. So I don't know how many lives I saved there, whether it was 1 or 3, I don't know. Or maybe it was just giving someone another opportunity to fight another day and live better. The second batch went to Ohio. I always, you want your blood to stay here in Detroit, but really you want your blood to go wherever it can go to help someone in need. And so I'm going to get out of the way and allow Ms. DeAndra Smith to give information. She's from the Red Cross. Again, information on the importance of donating blood, and even more so, black people donating blood, especially in the situation concerning sickle cell. Ms. Smith?
So yes, thank you. I just want everybody to count to 2. Every 2 seconds, somebody in the United States needs blood. So that's right there, someone needed blood, whether it's from trauma, an accident, giving birth, blood therapies for sickle cell or cancer treatments. Every 2 seconds, someone in the United States needs blood. And so we don't think about that a lot. We don't think about how important it is until you're in that space where you need blood. I've had so many people that did not. I say blood is like insurance. You never know when you're going to need it, but when you need it, you're going to want it to be there. And so many times, it's not there. It is not there. It's not readily available on shelves. It cannot be manufactured. It has to come from willing donors. Last year, I needed 12 pints of blood to prepare for surgery. And it took us around 4 days to gather all of the pints that I needed for that surgery. Earlier this year, it was a sickle cell patient, and he had a rare blood type. And so we literally had to get the blood from Florida for him at Children's Hospital because it wasn't readily available. So when you're giving blood, sometimes it is in emergency situations for car accidents or trauma, but most of the time here in Michigan, it is for blood therapy. It's for sickle cell patients. It's for cancer patients. It's for leukemia patients. When we're talking about blood therapies with sickle cell, pediatric patients, when they're having their blood therapies, they need 5 to 8 pints of blood. Adult patients need 8 to 10. When you give, you're only given 1 pint, but these patients need multiple pints. And depending on the type of therapy they have, they may require up to 100 pints of blood in 1 year. Some go in every other month, some go in monthly for their blood therapy. So we're always on the lookout. Yesterday, I put together the blood drive for the alphas, and when I say it was just such a beautiful sight. I've been doing this role. I cover the entire state of Michigan, and I travel throughout Michigan, and I talk to schools, churches, wherever I have a space to have a blood drive, I try to set up a blood drive. And by far, that was the biggest blood drive that I have had in the 3.5 years at the American Red Cross. Just seeing all of these African American donors, all of these black men donating, just rolling up their sleeves, because it does go back into our community. It does go back into the patients that need it the most. You can track it. If you have the blood donor app on your phone, you can track where your blood went. And people are surprised that their blood is going to Children's Hospital, it's going to Harper Hospital, it's going to the DMC, or it's going to the University of Michigan Hospital. So just a little bit of information. We collect about 40% of the entire nation blood supply. But without diverse donors, we would not be able to supply everyone's needs. You can go to the next slide. So, like I said, every 2 seconds, someone needs blood, and every donation is important. But we need a more diverse blood supply. Next slide. And the reason why is if you're getting multiple transfusions or you're getting therapy, the more transfusion related complications will come into play unless you have a donor from the same ethnic background, because it goes beyond just your blood type, but it goes to the antigens that's on the blood. And for sickle cell patients specifically, we look for the negative CEK antigen. And so when you give blood, we will test to see if you have that antigen, and we will let you know that, hey, your blood is the most compatible for someone living with sickle cell. And you can go to the next slide. So it's just showing you all the things that blood can be used for, as I said before: sickle cell disease, cancer patients, leukemia, mothers giving birth, premature babies, accident, trauma victims, open heart surgeries, hip replacement. It's just so much that we don't think about. I think that when we think about the use for blood, we just think that it's in emergency situations and that, hey, it'll never happen to me. But I've experienced people that said they was just going to the doctor on a regular Tuesday, and their doctors seen that their blood was low and ended up having to have 6 pints of blood. Like, I've had so many different stories where people have literally come up to me and say, I never had blood before this, or this happened to me, or this. It's the stories that I've heard over the years of why people are thankful that they have people out there giving blood. You will be amazed. But we can't do this without people. We cannot do this without you rolling up your sleeves. Because like I said, blood is not manufactured. We need it from donors like yourselves. And if we don't have the donors, if we don't have the donations, then the patients are suffering. We have people that, like, we shouldn't have had to reach out all the way to Florida for those treatments for that sickle cell patient, but we didn't have the right type matches here in Michigan. And so I'm looking to change that. Every day when I'm out speaking to communities, setting up blood drives throughout the state, I am trying to put a pool together where we have not just donors that's donating once in a blue moon, but we're having lifelong donors that's going to donate on a regular basis. You can donate blood every 56 days. And if you're donating blood on a regular basis, we're building up the blood supply so that if ever you need blood or someone you love needs blood, if it's a rare type, if it's your type, everybody's type, we want to make sure that it's available for you. Black and Latino populations have a higher frequency of O-type blood. And so O-type blood is in high demand at hospitals. You can go to the next slide. It's just talk about how it's more in high demand. And when we donate, because we have a higher type frequency of O-type blood, everyone wins because that blood is so in demand at hospitals. You can go to the next slide. You can keep going. Dr. Sherney already talked about what sickle cell is, so we don't have to go. We can go through just a few complications that I've experienced myself. I'm partially blind in my right eye because of sickling behind my eye. I've had 2 reconstructive knee surgeries. I've had my gallbladder taken out. I've been hospitalized over 80 times. It's real. The pain is real. The hospitalizations is real. The complications, I've experienced them all. But I always say that, having a good support group and knowing that, you have the resources to get better. And blood, when I'm not the type of sickle cell patient that needs blood on a regular basis. For me, it was a thing that I needed for my surgery. But I have friends that go in every month to get their blood exchanges. And when you're needing a blood exchange and you're already in the hospital and you're already going through so much, blood should be the last thing that you're worrying about when you're trying to get better. We can go past this. Dr. Sherney already covered that. So I wanted to show, like I said, blood should be one less thing for patients to worry about. That was a picture from last year when I went and I received my blood exchange. When I needed 12 pints for my blood exchange for my surgery. And so what they do is they take out your sickle cell blood and exchange it with healthy blood from donors like yourselves, and it helped me so that I can have less complications going into my surgery. But when you look at it on a grand scale of the things, we're not taking that much blood from you when you donate. That's what people think we're taking. And people look at that. That's what people think that we go take. They think that by the time you get off the table, your eyes going to be sunken in and you're going to be shaking. And no, we're not taking that much blood from you when you donate. We're taking 1 pint of blood. You will not miss it. I always tell people, try it once. Everybody will not be able to donate. If you can't donate, educate. And if you don't have the best experience, at least you tried it at least once. But you never know how that experience is going to be unless you try it. And you will be helping to save lives and improve the quality of life for someone not only living with sickle cell, but living with any other disease. We do sickle cell trait screening when you give blood. Like I said, we do screening for the negative CEK antigen, and we will let you know your trait status when you give blood. You can go on to the next. Oh, that was a video, but you can go on. So how you can help is, like I said, donate. If you can't donate, educate, volunteers. All of the blood drives that was mentioned, I help put together. If your church want to do a blood drive, if your organization, if your job, if your school, if your children's school, we have scholarships for schools. We even do blood drives at elementary schools. Now, the kids can't give, but we try to encourage the parents to come in and give. But we still do scholarships for those elementary all the way up to college. So if you know someone that wants to get involved with hosting a blood drive or volunteering at a blood drive, let me know. But especially if you want to donate blood, go to redcrossblood.org. You can just type in your zip code and all of the blood drives that is in your area will pop up. And make sure, I always tell people this, make sure you're hydrated, make sure you have a full meal, and make sure that, so many times African American donors get deferred because we have low iron, so build up on that. Low hemoglobin levels is nothing. You won't know until you get tested. A lot of people are surprised when they're turned away, but if you come in with a full meal, drinking lots of water, we're going to give you a small exam to make sure you are healthy enough to give. And it only takes an hour of your time, start to finish. And maybe less than that, because yesterday, when I say I had a donor that finished in 4 minutes, had another donor that finished in 6. I was like, are y'all racing to give blood to fill up this bag? But I've also seen donors that take 30 minutes. So it just depends on how hydrated you are, but I always say just leave out an hour of your time. That's from start to finish. That's from you checking in, getting your little mini health screening, to giving blood, to sitting down, eating your juice and cookies, and just an hour of your time. And you can save up to 3 lives.
And Ms. Smith, you did talk about any local blood drives that are taking place. I'm letting you know right now, D1, there's one that's going to happen in April 17th at Greater Grace Temple, right up the street on 7 Mile, not too far from Telegraph. That is from 1 until 7 p.m. So mark it on your calendars. As a matter of fact, don't just mark it on your calendar because you can't just show up. You've got to pre-register because you've got to go
Yes.
through some questions. Talk about those questions that they want to ask so that people will be prepared if they want to donate. Excuse me.
So it's going to be a assortment of different health questions. It's a questionnaire. The best way to do it is a rapid pass because it takes about 15 minutes to go through all of these questions. And if you download the app and do it beforehand, then you will have it all ready to go. But the questions is just making sure that you're healthy enough to give. It ranges from your medical history to your current history. And we just want to make sure all of it is confidential. You're going to go over it with in your health history booth. But if you have any questions about the questionnaire, when you come in, that medical professional can help answer those questions for you.
We've got a question over here.
Yes.
Is the questionnaire available online so people can look at that questionnaire prior to coming?
Yes, if you download the Blood Donor app and download the Rapid Pass, it's the Rapid Pass. Yes, and it's online and available for you.
All right, we got one all the way over here. BC.
Yes, what's some of the reasons why you're denied? Because I was denied years ago, but when I did my screening check, I served in the military overseas, and they said something about mad cow, but I didn't have mad cow. I just got upset about it.
Yes.
They don't really tell you much, but because I was over in the military in Europe for a certain amount of time, they don't want my blood. So is there any other reasons?
So they have what we call as a waiting period. If you travel overseas or if you travel to certain areas, they do have, now things have changed currently, but we still have that waiting period and it just varies from where you traveled from. But other reasons, like I said, low hemoglobin levels, it could be the type of medications that you're currently on. There's a list, and if you go to redcrossblood.org, it will let you know. Travel is a big one too. Still, there's many different reasons why you can't give, but all of those can be remedied. Like I said, it can be a waiting period where you might have to wait 3 months if you traveled outside of the U.S., but after those 3 months are up, you can come and give. Even if you have your iron levels are lower, you can raise those up by taking supplements, eating green leafy vegetables. You know, that can change as well. Now, the medications, that may not change, but a lot of people don't know is if you're on certain medications, you can still give. You can still give if you are taking certain medications, like diabetes medications. It's a long list, too many to name, but if you have a question or you're concerned, like I'm on a specific medication, you can always go to redcrossblood.org, look up that medication, and see if you're eligible or ineligible to give.
Dr. Sharney, right here. So how, without taking tests specifically to find out if you have the sickle cell trait, how would one know if they had it, especially prior to them wanting to have children? And then that's part A. Part B is, once your child is born, how do you know if your child have that trait? sickle
Okay,
cell trait?
so the first question is, if you don't have a test, you don't know. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the first part is that if you don't have a special test, then you don't know. You know, there's no way. I was an expert witness on paternity court with Lauren Lake. And the guy had his whole family history of nobody's sick, nobody has sickle cell disease, but the baby really did have sickle cell trait, and it really did come from him. And he had it, and he didn't know he had it. You know, so you can have it and not know you have it. You have to have a very special test to determine whether you have sickle cell trait. Okay, so the second part of the question is, since 1987 in Michigan, every baby is tested for sickle cell disease at birth because we can start a life-saving antibiotic that'll stop them from dying from infection. But we also find the babies who have sickle cell trait. And we have one of the most comprehensive trait follow-up programs in the country. And we send a letter to the family. And then it starts with a flyer because people don't like to read long letters. You recently had a baby with sickle cell trait. And then we tell them why that's important. And then our patient advocates will follow up with a phone call to see if you received the letter, if you have any questions, if you know your trait status, if you want to get more information. So if you were born after 1987, then you have been tested. Now, there's a lot of controversy. I don't know whether you read about the football player that died, all of a sudden and had sickle cell trait, and they're trying to blame it on the sickle cell trait. And now all college athletes have to come in and be tested, And what we really wanted, the American Society of Hematology and the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, what we wanted is to just establish universal precautions, because people with sickle cell trait can get into trouble if they're dehydrated or if they exert too much without being conditioned. So we figured, just like in the military, when everybody was hydrated and conditioned, nobody died suddenly, but again, it's money, lawsuits, everybody's afraid. So now people are being tested before they can participate in college sports with the NCAA.
Wow. Got one over here for you?
I guess it's two. One of them, I guess a statement. Before I got married, my wife and I took the test and to see if any kids would be sickle cell trait. I think we both had a sickle cell trait, but it was so low that, excuse me, it didn't matter. So that was the second part was, if you have the sickle cell trait, can you donate blood?
Okay, both really good points.
Great question.
When you said you got tested and you both had sickle cell trait, but it was so low, there's not a thing like that the sickle cell trait is so low. You either have it or you don't have it, and it's in your genes. So if you're a man and you have sickle cell trait, half of your sperm carry the gene for sickle cell, and the other half carry the gene for normal hemoglobin. So there was a 25% chance with each pregnancy that your child could have sickle cell disease. Okay, so you just beat the odds. Okay, if you had children that didn't have sickle cell disease, and you need to know their trait status because they have a 50% chance of having sickle cell trait. Okay, so now, what was the second question?
Can you
If you have
donate?
that
Oh,
trait,
that's
Yes.
a really important question, yeah, because if you have sickle cell trait, you absolutely can donate blood.
Wow.
Here's the thing, your blood will not go to someone who has sickle cell disease. And that's something that, family members, I want my blood, and the thing is, it's not that there's anything wrong with your blood. It's that when people like Deandra need to have surgery, we need to know how much sickle hemoglobin is in their system. So if you're getting blood from somebody with sickle cell trait, you don't know whether that sickle hemoglobin came from the person with sickle cell trait or whether it's the person's own sickle hemoglobin, So it's really a technical reason. And in fact, the only time that sickle cell trait negative blood gets ordered is when it's going to someone with sickle cell disease. Otherwise, it doesn't even matter that you have sickle cell trait. So you won't be involved, if you have the trait, you can still save lots of lives, but it won't be people with sickle cell. The other thing that I need to mention is that within 2 weeks, I had 2 young women, a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old, die in the emergency room. One of them, your hemoglobin that measures whether you're anemic or not, is supposed to be around 12. Their hemoglobins were both less than 2. And we couldn't find blood, because they had developed these antibodies that she was talking about. Your blood has to match, and we couldn't find matching blood. And so it's for real. It's not, just something that we're talking about. It's people die.
Got one here?
So I got 2 questions. If you already suffer from anemia, doctor already told you you're anemic, puts you on whether it's iron or what have you. Number 1, are you a viable candidate to give blood? That you already know that. And maybe that through the screening process, maybe there's more comes out from that. And number 2, is there a preferred blood type for whatever goes on, surgeries and whatnot?
Okay, so if you're anemic, one of the things they're going to do when you go to donate blood is they're going to prick your finger, and they're going to determine whether you're anemic. And if you're too anemic, then you can't. So I have a condition called thalassemia trait, right? So sometimes my hemoglobin is a little low. So I've been rejected a few times, but I've also been able to donate sometimes. So that kind of goes, it depends on how anemic you are, okay? And then the blood for people, for black people in general, is we want C, E, and Kel negative blood because that is more likely to match somebody who's black. That's just generally. And you know, one of the things that James said about not enough black people give blood. That's really true, you know, that not as many as white people. But the other thing that's true is that our systems are so diverse, you know, because we had such impact from other races, you know, like being raped by slave masters and that kind of thing, right? So it's not, everybody always wants to blame black, oh, they don't give blood, but that's true. But in addition to that, we're so diverse that even if the same number of black people gave blood as white people, we still wouldn't have enough blood because it's very difficult to match a diverse group of people. So thank you for your questions.
All right. Any additional questions, Sean? Okay, sorry about that. Missed. Got one here?
My question is, my grandparents, I was told, passed away because of sickle cell. And I don't believe I've ever been tested, but my children have never had sickle cell. So is that the only way that they can have sickle cell is if it's passed down?
The only way
DNA?
you can have sickle cell disease or sickle cell trait is that it's passed down through your genes. But because sickle cell trait, you have one, like if you're a woman, half of your eggs carry the gene for sickle hemoglobin, half of your eggs carry the gene for normal hemoglobin. So it can actually miss a generation, you know, and it can't just pick back up. But if both of you gave a normal gene, then the child's going to be perfectly normal, and that's the end of the legacy of sickle cell disease for that family, for that particular child. Now, they could have a baby with somebody with sickle cell trait and have a baby with sickle cell trait, but it doesn't skip a generation, and because it's what we call autosomal recessive, it takes 2 sickle genes to make the disease, right? And people will assume I've been healthy all my life. I had a father tell me, I'm healthy as a horse. I couldn't possibly have sickle cell trait. And I told him, I'm healthy as a horse too, and I have sickle cell trait. You know, so it's really, there's a lot of misconceptions.
Well, we want to thank both of you for joining us today and educating us on sickle cell, as well as encouraging us to go out and donating blood. Remember what I said, April what day? Okay, they're paying attention. Look at that. April 17th over at Greater Grace Temple between 1 and 7, but go online and pre-register. Sometimes they actually give gift certificates and things as well, right?
We will, every presenting dog. And we have a blood drive coming up in April at the Sickle Cell Disease Association as well. April, you can go to redcrossblood.org, but the month of April, it will be 18 blood drives dedicated to sickle cell patients. So anywhere, if you have family on the east side, tell them. Have family on the west side, tell them. But yes, you will get a $20 Amazon gift card emailed to you within 30 days of your donation for giving.
Yeah, and Councilman Tate, if I could just say one last thing.
Absolutely.
September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and every September we have a walk, and it's like a family reunion.
Yes,
It's
it's
a
so
gathering.
fun.
It's so much fun. I created a hustle called the Sickle Slide, and we do that. And you should come out and wear red and visit our vendors Saturday, September the 13th at the Charles H. Wright Museum for African American History.
And I always have a team. I never win. So I
Yeah,
might
we have
come to District
competitions,
1
right,
and
right.
y'all be my
Yeah,
team.
yeah, for sure.
For walkers.
Yep. Okay.
So we got a playlist now for the sickle slide. If you're ready
Oh,
for that.
absolutely. It's on YouTube.
Okay, all right.
It's a sickle slide tutorial.
Bring it then.
You know?
I'm ready. Y'all, give it up again for Dr. Witten Sherney, as well as Ms. Deandra Smith. We
Thank
appreciate you
you.
so,
Thank you.
so much.